Gentle fade out, and hello. Yes. Lucifer means moonbringer. Oh, don't throw the switch for it. There you go. It's my light up moon. Can go a couple different colors. Yeah. All right. We're back. It's Starry Wisdom Sunday. I've got the Starry Wisdom Church banner. And we're ready to go. General Q&A, folks. It's been a couple weeks since I've been with you, so I figured we just open it up and let you guys choose a topic. I've got a couple things I want to talk about, a couple of ideas kicking around in the back of my head. I've started writing a book, and I see George has been talking about TWOW, some of the updates that he's been doing, so we can talk about that. And we can talk about anything you guys want to. And I will just tell you that you can bump your question to the front of the line by, of course, donating to paypal.me/mythicalastronomy, which is very easy. You can type your question in the comments field, or you can do a super chat. And ladies and gentlemen, the super chat theremin is back. That's all the theremin we get for now, but we do have it ready after many requests. Yes, rest in peace to Alex Trebek. That's worth saying, absolutely. And yeah, so welcome, friends. 29.9K. Oh gosh, I haven't checked my subtotal in a hot second. Where am I exactly? Let's just see. It's 29.9. Let me look exactly what the number is and see how close. Maybe we can get over 30K on the air live. Wouldn't that be great? 30K will enable me to do some cool stuff. And thank you, Christopher, for the 420 super chat. 29,964. Ladies and gentlemen, we are 36 subscribers away. I have a feeling, more than a feeling, we might be able to do this today live on the air. All we need is 36 subscribers. 36, that's right. So if you're watching and you haven't subbed, now's the time. Twinkle, twinkle, now's the time. Click the sub button. But anyways, let's stop the count. No, don't stop the count. Keep the count going. We've got to get to 30K, although good humor there. It's good political joke. And if some of you are afraid that you'd be tuning into some sort of, political stream, some sort of gloaty, type of liberal thing, that's not what we're doing here. I've thought about doing political stuff, but I don't think I'm going to. There's enough political talkers out there in the world. I'm going to stick with symbolism and mythology. I am thinking about branching out from A Song of Ice and Fire, though. And in fact, my next video is going to be the inverted Garden of Eden, reinterpreting the Garden of Eden, which I've talked about many times. It was actually right at the center of my A Song of Ice and Fire ideas brainwave that I first had about the moon meteors and a long night and all that stuff. And if you go all the way back to my very first draft of my first essay on Westeros.org, which is still available, still up there in public, then you'll see that I've got a little section at the end talking about Lucifer and the snake in the Garden of Eden. And in my original Bloodstone compendium series, episode number 6 is called Lucifer Means Lightbringer. And that has the infant version of the whole Garden of Eden train of ideas that I've got. So that is going to be the topic of my first book, hopefully my first of more than one. I guess is it pretentious to say first when you haven't? I don't know. I'm trying to write a book is the point. And it's going to be about symbolism and mythology, but we're going to start off by reinterpreting the Garden of Eden and talking about the symbols there. And yeah, so I might a little later on in the stream, I was thinking about reading a couple of pages, little advanced release. So I guess I should clarify. So I'm writing a book and I'm making a video. The video is essentially kind of like a YouTube friendly version of what's going to be like the first chapter and a half of the book. So the book is going to start with the Garden of Eden stuff. And then from there, I'm going to branch off into talking about the role that symbolism and religion and mythology plays in our lives. I'm going to talk about a few other universal myth themes like the Christ man, and compare him to Odin and stuff like that. I've got some interesting things to say about Eve and some other goddesses, and it's all going to sort of fit together under the banner of understanding the nature of symbolic communication, which said very simply means, don't take religion literally, don't take mythology literally, understand that it's, layered metaphor. It's meant to provoke internal thought and change as opposed to become an instrument of dogma. And, to the extent that people have negative feelings about religion, it's generally what they're referring to as the dogmatic use of religion. And so I feel like I've got something to say about that. You guys know, a lot of you probably know I was raised in a conservative Christian home, Christian school, all that stuff. And so I've definitely had that point of view, and have become more of an agnostic and someone who has studied, I won't say studied, again, it sounds a little pretentious, but I've definitely, looked into other world cultures and religions as a way of rounding out my experience and placing, my Christian beliefs and the Christian mythology that I was raised with into the family of world mythology and religion. So you guys know that's a topic near and dear to my heart. So it's going to be a short book. It's going to be a nice little thin one, not a huge tome. And then I'll probably try to go on to writing fiction and stuff like that, pseudo Atlantis, all that. So yes, George Martin did indeed just release a blog post about his I don't know if he is a little bit of a troll, but it does have a little bit of an update. So let's actually talk about that. That would be a fun topic to dig into. Let's see here. George also had a couple of political posts I noticed. I think he's pretty happy about the election results, as am I. Let's see here. Back to Westeros. Yeah, I'll read this one here. This is not the political one. This is about Winds of Winter. So he says, sometimes I do get the feeling that most of you reading my posts here care more about what is happening in Westeros than what is happening in the United States. So let me assure you that when not sweating out election returns or brooding over other real-world problems, I have continued to work on The Winds of Winter. No, sorry, still not done, but I do inch closer. It's a big book. A big book. Is it two bigs in there? I try not to dwell on that too much. I write a chapter at a time, a page at a time, a sentence at a time, a word at a time. It's the only way. And sometimes I rewrite. Of late, I've been spending a lot of time with the Lannisters, Cersei and Tyrion in particular. I've also paid a visit to Dorne and dropped into Old Town a time or three. That one's interesting. In addition to turning out new chapters, I've been revising some old ones, some very old, including, yes, some stuff I read at cons ages ago or even posted online as samples. I tweak stuff constantly and sometimes go beyond tweaking, moving things around, combining chapters, breaking chapters in two, reordering stuff. None of this is even remotely new. This is how the first 5 books were written. He said, I was really on a roll back in June and July. Progress has continued since then, but more slowly. I suffered a gut punch in early August that really had me down for a time, and another for different reasons in early September. But I slogged on, and of late I am picking up steam again. Then he goes on to talk about House of the Dragon. He says, despite COVID-19, we're making great progress on House of the Dragon. Ryan Kondik and Miguel Sapochnik are in London. Casting has begun. It's all looking very exciting. So a couple things caught my eyes there, guys. One, it's cool that obviously he's working on Winds. He's pretty immersed in the project and he's, working on different chapters. But yeah, been to Old Town 3 times. So Old Town definitely climbing up the list of most anticipated plot lines of Winds of Winter, I think, as we've looked at all this more. The Euron stuff, Sam, the Slayer stuff, Old Man Hightower, is he Saruman? Does he have a Palantir? Will Euron trigger some sort of beginning of the Long Night Apocalypse event from the top of the Hightower? I've even discussed the idea that Dany might land in Westeros at Old Town, especially if she's coming back to Westeros with Victarion's fleet, and Victarion is meeting up with the rest of the Ironborn. So there's lots of stuff that could be happening at Old Town. Obviously, Dampere is there. you know, tied to the prow of silence, waiting to be sacrificed or not or whatever, to raise the Kraken from the depths. We're all looking forward to that. So very cool that they are, very cool that, oh my goodness, more Lee. Setting off the Theremin super chat Theremin. Thank you, Maura, for all the fabulous content. Thank you. Oh, you're quite welcome. Hope you liked the Dark Star video. I am still working on the Dark Star symbolism part 2. But the next video, like I said, is going to be the Garden of Eden video, which is going to be about 30 minutes long. And like I said, although it is not a Song of Ice and Fire based, you will recognize many of the mythemes and lessons that we've all sort of learned while researching A Song of Ice and Fire in the essay. So I think you'll enjoy that very much. So Old Town, yes, lots going on in Old Town. It's cool that George is fired up in writing about that. It's just very exciting, very exciting. And like I said, when we were talking about Euron a few weeks ago, I very much expect Euron to declare himself king at Old Town, to set up shop at the top of the high tower, or maybe underneath in the fused stone fortress, you know, probably do a little bit of both. So I think the whole, you know, symbolism wise, the high tower is set up like a model of a weirwood tree. It's got the white tower instead of the white tree. The high tower sigil is a white tower crowned with red flame, quote unquote. And of course, the weirwoods are crowned with red leaves that look like flame or like blood. And then the idea of a tower and a beacon at the top. We're talking about, you know, occult symbolism having to do with the tarot and stuff like that. So yes, essentially Euron as an alt blood raven, an evil green seer sort of figure, an evil Odin figure. Very much expect him to set up shop at the high tower and do his evil wizard thing there. Oh, and the last part of that correlation, of course, at the bottom of the Weirwoods, we find the caves, right? We find these dark caves, we find the green seers, and we find a lot of snake symbolism because of Yggdrasil. Yggdrasil has the Nidhogg serpent amongst the roots. And so we find Bloodraven, who is a dragon, amongst the roots. And then we also find the Weirwood roots themselves being compared to serpents and worms and things like that. And then, of course, at Old Town, we have the fused stone fortress underneath the White Tower. And it was made by dragons, obviously, because it's made of fused stone. And it's got its halls are more like tunnels, quote unquote. So it's a very nice Weirwood symbol for Euron, the evil green seer, to occupy and set up shop. Point of saying, we're gonna get several chapters there. There's gonna be a lot of action there. It's not just gonna be Euron's battle, taking and burning Old Town and moving on. I think Old Town's gonna be a major location. You know, if the books had a HBO intro where it showed the cities, you know, the major cities that we're operating in, then the Old Town would definitely be one. We're gonna get a lot of stuff there. So, whoop, it was an accidental theremin. Now it's just going on its own. Okay, it stopped. There you go. Those theremins are like, you know, they're clearly meant as divining rods for spirits from the nether realm. So it's no surprise when they have a mind of their own. All right, let's check it out. All right, we've gained 1 subscriber. We're at 29,965. We need 35 subscribers. If you're watching and you haven't subbed, hit the button. I won't beat the dead horse though. I'll keep talking about stuff. All right, so there is. Am I horny? Oh, always horny. Going back to the Not a Blog post. It's in addition to turning out new chapters, I've also been revising some old ones. The old ones, you say? Very interesting. Do you guys think we'll get to the Isle of Faces in this book? I mean, we might, right? Every Bran chapter is going to be like a series of reveals and visions and stuff. So he might start getting glimpses of whatever's on the Isle of Faces in this book. I don't think that was meant as an old one's double entendre, but it's just an excuse to talk about it. Cersei and Tyrion visit to Dorne. So Cersei and Tyrion is in Slaver's Bay, forming some sort of very broy alliance with Sir Barristan and possibly a Victorian. We talked about that That's going to be high comedy. I'm sure that's going to be a lot of fun to write. Cersei is headed towards some sort of trial. We don't know how that's going to work. Potentially the Mountain Ungregor fighting against somebody representing the faith, whom we don't know who that's going to be. So I am looking forward to that. That's all got to come to a head kind of right as or before Fagon attacks King's Landing. And I think that's coming also pretty quickly in the Winds of Winter. So, and just in case you guys have missed it, I'm sure everybody knows, but Quinn from Quinn's Ideas and myself did do a Winds of Winter prediction series. It's 19 videos long. We still have 4 more to go to get to 23 that we promised, and we will get around to it. George is giving us lots of time. But yeah, Winds of Winter predictions playlist if you want Winds of Winter predictions and previews of all the different plot threads that are happening, including Dorne. Our Dorne episode was one of our longest ones, too. It was almost an hour. So if you like Dorne, then check that out. And George has said he's been writing a bunch in Dorne. So what do you guys think is going on in Dorne? Because it seems like all the Dornish are leaving Dorne, right? Sand Snakes are headed to King's Landing, except for Obar, who's headed to High Hermitage. I guess that counts. See, all the Darkstar stuff, right? Maybe George is writing Darkstar stuff right now. I mean, there's not a lot going on in Sunspear. Just Arya Hota sitting around watching the oranges fall and waiting for Dorne to fall asleep at the Water Gardens. So the Dorne action probably is the High Hermitage stuff. Because, like I said, everyone else has left Dorne. And by the way, thank you, Quinn's Ideas, for this jacket. Quinn bought this for me on a whim. Let's see here. And we're just roommates, by the way. I always get that question. Will Clark, are Euron and the Harlaw of Harlaw together? Okay. Just had to tame that thing a little out of control. Are you talking about Roderick the Reader? Roderick the Reader is not, but I don't know if he's the Harlaw of Harlaw. That's gosh, that's obscure Ironborn politics. Let's see here. If you can find out. Yeah, it is Roderick the Reader. So no, I don't think he's in league with Euron. He's openly stood up to Euron. I don't think that's a fake, because I think Roderick the Reader comes off as somebody who appreciates the weight of history, the weight of magic, the importance of power, all that stuff. I think he understands politics very well, and so I think he'd had every reason to be cautious and skeptical of Euron, and even look for ways to oppose Euron. So no, I don't think they're working together. I think that's just what it appears to be. Yeah, Roderick and Sam, that would be cool. So one of the things that I've been talking about lately, as far as Old Town goes, we think about Euron's coming to attack, right? He's pretty much certain that he's going to destroy some of the city and probably end up in control of the city. And we've got Sam there in Old Town, who's obviously there to get some sort of important knowledge or artifacts or both that we're going to need for, the end game of the story. Likely that's we're talking books here. Perhaps there's a magical talisman involved, but most likely we're talking books or the knowledge that's in the books. So what are we going to see from Sam, right? Sam needs to gain access to the secrets of the Citadel, Freudian, and then he needs to get out. He needs to escape. And we've got Alaris the Sphinx, who's a very capable, good with disguises, obviously, and trickery. Who's been basically in Marwyn the Mage's little cabal, which Sam has now been absorbed into. So we've got a faceless man who's hiding as Pate, the pig boy, and we've got Alaris the Sphinx, and we've got Sam, all close together. So I think there's going to be some fun little drama there as Euron is attacking. There's got to be some way that Sam gets the knowledge that he needs and either escapes or is maybe even taken prisoner, only to eventually, escape later and bring the secret knowledge where it needs to be. So, Will Foran says, Will Tyrion figure out who's the imposter in Meereen? Is Greengrace the imposter? Who's the harpy, you might say? So the Meereenese politics is definitely pretty tricky. I've read some good theories that it could be the Greengrace. Shave Pate, I think, is mostly a red herring, as is his star, but he might not be. It's hard for me to say. I'm just kind of waiting to see how that plays out. I do think Tyrion makes sense as somebody who's, has the skill to unravel it. The right mix of cunningness and a little bit of cruelty that might be needed to ferret that out. So that makes perfect sense. I mean, it's the kind of thing that Tyrion should be doing in Meereen, right? So yeah, I would expect him to unravel the Harpy plot. Good comment, Will. Harpies are female. I would say it has to be the Greengrace. So that's a good point. That actually does make sense to me. It's the kind of thing that George likes to be consistent on, I would think. That would be interesting. And if you look at like everything she does and says, it's pretty consistent with her being the Harpy. Doesn't necessarily have to be, but it would make sense. And yes, there's the longer URL. But basically all you need to do is put in paypal.me/mythicalastronomy, as it says right there, and you'll get it. Very easy. You don't even have to have a PayPal to use it. In fact, let's check the old email box and see what's going on. Yes, you've got money. I got one this morning too, by the way, from Ryan. Thank you, Ryan. Ernest with a 420. Thanks for your work. You got me back into A Song of Ice and Fire after the disaster of the TV show. Yes, that's my favorite thing. I'm rereading the series thanks to you, trying to catch the deeper stuff and having a blast. Right on. Yeah, for me, the reason why A Song of Ice and Fire has so much staying power is because George is so well versed in the classics, classic mythology, classic literature, and just classic pop culture, like comics and movies and, books and just everything, all of that. All of his influences are brewed together and in the bitch's brew that is A Song of Ice and Fire. So when we study A Song of Ice and Fire, we're not really just studying that. We're studying a whole host of other subjects. For me, of course, on this channel, we're mostly dovetailing into world mythology and symbolism, which nothing better than talking about symbolism. So that's why A Song of Ice and Fire does have that depth. It's worth reading and rereading because there's just so much to be had, so many layers. I almost think about it as like a time capsule. If the Earth were destroyed or something by a giant meteor or comet or something like that, and somehow the hypothetical's falling apart. And anyways, if you only had like one piece of literature to survive from, our current era, The Song of Ice and Fire would be a good choice because it has so many universal themes, so many universal stories, its own version of so many of the classic world myths and archetypes and things like that. So I won't go on and on, but George that's one of the reasons why it does take longer to write. And I'm flipping back over to the Not a Blog entry to see if there's anything else that I missed in here. But yeah, he's talking about trying not to think about how big the book is. I mean, that definitely makes sense, right? It's a huge undertaking. And if you think about it as the huge undertaking, it's going to feel like a ton of bricks. So he just goes one book at a time, one chapter at a time, one character, one word. It makes sense. And of course, with all these layers of symbolism and references of the things, it's a complicated symphony that he's orchestrating here. Yeah, George is very much an onion knight with all the layers. That's good. I like that. He's instead of a Gardner style writer, he's an onion style writer, I should say. So I want to I had a little bit of a brainwave about the Tower of Joy. And I want to thank I got a oh gosh. There was a PayPal, somebody PayPal'd me a question last week. And you can do that, by the way, if you have a random question that you would like me to answer, you got a theory you want me to read, definitely a good way to do it is send me a PayPal and throw your idea at me. And so I did that, or somebody did that, and they had a longer question about the Tower of Joy. And Aaron was from Aaron. Thank you, Aaron. Aaron B. And it was about Jenny of Oldstones potentially surviving Summerhall and being the giving birth to Howland Reed and some other ideas. I have to say, Aaron, I don't think that Jenny could have survived Summerhall simply because the Ghost of Highheart would know. And the Ghost of Highheart is talking about gorging on grief at Summerhall. It's pretty clear that Jenny was the person that was closest and most dear to her. And that really only makes sense to me if Jenny actually did die at Summerhall. Ghost of Highheart's connected to the Weirwood net, so I don't see how she would know if Jenny was alive. However, what you were talking about with Howland and Arthur Dane at the Tower of Joy gave me some ideas, and that's what I would like to talk about. So think about this, right? We know that Howland Reed is the only reason that Ned survived the Tower of Joy. Now, in the books, we see a version of that. Basically, Howland Reed takes a wound and kind of, lays low for a minute. And then when Ned's about to get killed by Arthur Dane, Howland comes up from behind and knifes him in the throat, kind of, without honor or whatever. But essentially, he stabbed Arthur Dane, and then Ned picks up Dawn and finishes off Arthur. So I don't know that it's exactly like that in the books. I suspect I like the blow dart theory. Since Howland Reed is a Crannog man, I like the idea that he was over there, it was all, and his little blow dart, and that's the poisonous dart, or it could be a poison blade. I mean, it's said so many times that the Crannog men fight with poison weapons from all of their strange bog creatures and plants and flora and fauna and things. So that to me makes sense. But so Howland Reed, essentially, he's either going to use cunning or magic to aid Ned to have won that battle. But one thing that I do think the show got right is the idea of Ned finishing off Arthur Dane with Dawn. I think that makes a ton of sense. The Tower of Joy is very much a mock-up of the last hero and his crew battling against the others. Okay, I firmly believe that. As I've shown in symbolism of the others, Kingsguard, the Kingsguard essentially are serving as symbolic stand-ins for the others. And they have the ghostly white armor. It's snow white, moon pale. They're called White Shadows. They're a brotherhood. Can't have kids, all this stuff. So I've got some super chats coming in. Let me pause my Tower of Joy brainwave here. Matt Folger. Thank you, Matt. From a Canadian myth head, congrats on the exorcism. My American brothers and sisters, let's dream of spring and all its possibilities. Hear, hear. Jinty M. Oh, yeah, I just put these up on the thing. There's Matt. Hey, Matt. Nice facial hair. Very well-groomed. Well-groomed gentleman, Matt Folger. Jinty M. Needed this chat today. Been laid up with a leg infection all week. Oh, no, get better soon. Thinking of Doran Martell. His gouty knees. I suspect the gout is a deception. And now no eyes are on him. I'm intrigued to see what he does. Now he's out of sight and mind. Could be fun. I don't think it's a deception, man. He's the world's greatest actor if it's a deception. He's constantly wincing. We're inside of Ario's POV, and Ario believes it, and he's around him 24/7. So I don't see any reason for that to be a deception either. Doran Martell can be plenty calculating and cunning and have things up his sleeve that we didn't think of. Without faking the gout. I think the gout is real, but get well soon, Jinty, by all means. So, Tower of Joy, you've got your White Shadow Knights, your Kingsguard, and they are guarding the tower. Inside the tower is an Ice Moon Queen, Lyanna Stark. And by the way, I'll just show you. The Church of Starry Wisdom is a tall building, and it does go all the way up. Pay no attention to the candelabra hanging there. That's breaking the fourth wall. Okay, so up in the tower, we've got Lyanna Stark. She's an Ice Moon Maiden. Her symbol is the blue winter rose, yada, yada, yada. She's literally up in the tower, just like a moon maiden in a tower. So There's additional clues about the others because Lyanna's blue roses in Eddard's dream, version of the Tower of Joy, Lyanna's blue roses are blowing out the window and into the sky. They're as blue as the eyes of death. Well, the blue eyes of death, that obviously makes us think of the others who have eyes like blue stars, and they are literally death incarnate. And the thing is that, like I said, the eyes of the others are like blue stars. And where are stars? You see the stars up in the sky. There's got some nice big blue stars here, in fact. And so when you see the rose petals, like the eyes of the others, and they're up in the sky, it's basically just like putting blue stars in the sky, but it's sort of implying that the others are watching, right? The eyes of death are in the sky at the Tower of Joy, watching the scene. So this is a big clue that the events of the Tower of Joy are telling us something important about the others. I think it's a multifaceted thing. I think that it's the birth of Jon, for example, that wakes up the others and stirs them on to action, because Jon is the, quote, prince that was promised ... to the others, and that he has some sort of important destiny with the others. But if we think about this again as a mock-up of the last hero battle, Ned Stark would be your last hero. The story that we have of the last hero says that his 12 companions died, right? However, my Green Zombies theory is essentially that his 12 companions actually died and became resurrected Night's Watchmen, just like Cold Hands, and just like Jon Snow is going to be an undead Night's Watchman, right? So Ned Stark, he doesn't have 12 companions. He has 6 companions, but he is half a dozen instead of a dozen. But they are described as gray wraiths twice in the scene, which is great because the Night's Watch are like black shadows, and they're kind of like ghosts, the ones that are undead, like Cold Hands and Jon. So you've got Ned, a Stark last hero figure, and he's got undead companions, wraith companions, and he's going against these snowy white Kingsguard knights who are like the others, and they're guarding an Ice Moon Queen with a special child. All right. Now, I've talked about the idea of stealing a baby from the others many times. And of course, the precedent for that is Gilly and Sam. Gilly and Sam literally steal Gilly's son, Monster, who is promised to the others, just like the ancient Starks may have been promised to the others through some sort of unholy pact. And they steal baby Monster from Craster, who's a Night King parallel, because he's giving his sons to the others to be made into others, just like Night's King did. And so that baby that's stolen from him is taken south of the wall, and they even discuss bringing him to Winterfell. So there's potential that in the past, the last hero could have done something similar, could have stolen a baby that was meant to be given to the others and brought him back to become a Stark. And then the Starks have the blood of the other. I have a whole series called The Blood of the Other that runs with that theory. So you can see that at the Tower of Joy, right? You've got your Kingsguard knights who are like the others, and they're guarding this special baby, this baby that's promised to the others, a prince of the Ice Moon Queen, and basically the child of Night's Queen, because Lyanna and Night's Queen, that's their parallel figures. They're both Ice Moon Queens. And so that's the final piece of this puzzle is Dawn. And this is what I figured out this morning. So we've been asking the question about Dawn. I've speculated that it's the original Ice of House Stark, meaning that the Starks have this tradition of naming their swords Ice, which supposedly dates back to the Age of Heroes, which tells us that in the Age of Heroes, there was a Stark that had some very important ice sword or something like that began this naming tradition. And I think that was actually Dawn in the hands of the last hero. The last hero was probably a Stark. Dawn has a very good chance of being the original Lightbringer or the original Dragonsteel of the last hero. And so if you have a Stark wielding Dawn, well, Dawn is a big white sword, and it's pale as milk glass. And of course, the bones of the others are also described as pale as milk glass. So there's a lot of symbolism that Dawn shares with the others. The coloring, the descriptions. So you could see someone with a big white sword that defeats the ice demons. Well, you might look at it and say, well, that sword looks like it's made of ice. It's the coldest thing around. It's unbreakable. And so that's how I think that happened, essentially. You have the last hero wielding Dawn. The question we have is, how did the last hero get Dawn? Now, the other idea about Dawn that could make sense is that it could be from the great empire of the Dawn. Because when Dany sees the gemstone, the kingly ghosts with gemstone eyes in her Wake the Dragon dream, they're wielding swords of pale fire. I don't have a sword of pale fire. I have Foam Keeper here. Damascus Foam Keeper. But the gemstone emperors in Dany's vision, they have swords of pale fire. So maybe Dawn being a pale sword made from a pale stone, perhaps this is great empire of the Dawn technology. Perhaps it's the original, it's like the predecessor of Valyrian steel. This would make a lot of sense, right? Well, this all sort of comes together, right? So if I've said, if the Night's King is Azor Ahai, as I've speculated, well, then you can see how this might have happened. Azor Ahai carries Dawn. I shouldn't hold this up. This doesn't look right. Azor Ahai essentially brings Dawn to Westeros when he invades Westeros. He becomes the Night's King, and he has this white sword. So this makes sense because now the Night's King has stolen Dawn, right? Which makes sense symbolically because the long night, there's no dawn. The sun never rises. It's a night that lasts forever. So when you think about the others or the Night's King, a leader of the others stealing Dawn, it sort of has a lot of synergy, right? So if you have the Night's King figure with the sword Dawn, then this sort of parallels Arthur Dayne at the Tower of Joy. Arthur Dayne essentially is a perfect Azor Ahai turned Night's King figure because the Danes have all that Morning Star, Lightbringer symbolism, but Arthur Dayne is wearing all the white snowy armor of the Kingsguard. So he's very much like a Morning Star Azor Ahai figure who is now frozen in ice, and he's wielding Dawn, and he's guarding the Night's Queen. And along comes a last hero with the help of the Children of the Forest, aka Howland Reed, who's standing in for the Children of the Forest that quote unquote helped the last hero. And Howland Reed probably had something to do with putting Dawn into Ned's hands so that he could kill Arthur Dayne, or helping him to kill Arthur Dayne so that he could have Dawn in his hands. However you want to look at that. We've always wondered, what is it? What help is it that the Children of the Forest gave to the last hero, right? We're given this story about the last hero where first he has a sword that breaks. You know, the others chased him and it was so cold that his sword froze and broke. That's the first part of the story. Then we get interrupted, and then Bran sort of blurts out at the end, oh, the Children of the Forest, they'll help him. You know, they helped him. They saved him. And then elsewhere, we hear about the last hero at the end slaying the others with the sword of dragon steel that they couldn't stand against and leading the first men of the Night's Watch into battle. So something happened with the sword, right? First he has a broken sword, then he has this awesome dragon steel sword. So either he fixed his broken sword or he got a new sword, right? And also in between having the broken sword and then emerging victorious, leading the Night's Watch with Dragonsteel, he got help from the Children of the Forest. So what if the Children of the Forest helped the last hero obtain the sword that is known as Dragonsteel, which would be Dawn and the original Ice? It would make a lot of sense. It would parallel, again, the Tower of Joy, where you have Howland Reed standing in for the Children of the Forest, helping the last hero figure to defeat the others and steal a baby from the others. And so this is what I think happened with Dawn, essentially, is that it was in control, in the hands of the Night King, who used to be Azor Ahai, who comes from the great empire of the Dawn. But then the last hero, essentially, with the help of the children, was able to defeat him and steal Dawn back. And once we steal Dawn back from the others, or reclaim Dawn, well, that should be the end of the long night, right? It's the sword of the morning, literally the sword that helps the last hero return the morning and return the dawn. So it all makes sense, right? So there you go. There's my new, more detailed speculation about the Tower of Joy, is that we should see Howland Reed do something specifically that helps Ned gain possession of the sword Dawn. That's what I think. All right. think I'm going to change my headgear. This one's kind of uncomfortable today. 1 second, guys. I have options. Oh, yeah. There we go. That's better. Channeling my outer Bootsy, not my inner Bootsy. This is more like outer Bootsy. And in fact, we can increase the Bootsy factor with these star glasses. Oh, yes. And we have, here we go. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. The sword that brings the morning. Right. Okay, so let's tie this back to Darkstar and some of the stuff that I've talked about recently with Darkstar. So I've speculated that Darkstar is going to steal Dawn, right? Well, Darkstar is a dead ringer for a Night King figure, specifically an Azor High turned into a Night's King figure, because the Danes have. Don't tell me I look like Elton John. Actually, Elton John's cool. That's fine with that. It's funny if you Bootsy and Elton John have a lot of the same accoutrement. It's just that, I'm not black and I don't have like Jerry curl and stuff. So I guess it's going to be more of a, anyways, whatever. They're both cool. They're both great musicians. So let's see. Where were we? Totally forgot what we were talking about. Oh yes, Darkstar. So House Dane, Sword of the Morning symbolism, Dawn symbolism, magic sword symbolism, all this stuff. However, sometimes we have those Danes that turn towards the night, right? We've got Darkstar, who is of the night. We've got Servorian Dane, who was called the Sword of the Evening, was sent to the wall. That's an interesting one, because you have a dark Dane, if you will, joining the wall, joining the Night's Watch, not joining the wall, joining the Night's Watch. And of course, Night's King was a member of the Night's Watch as well. So then, so then we have, let's see, what was I saying? So Darkstar, the whole point of Darkstar stealing Dawn, well, not the whole point. Let's put it this way. If Darkstar does steal Dawn, this would be kind of a confirmation of the idea that Night's King possessed Dawn, and that him taking Dawn is like part of the long night. Again, the idea of stealing Dawn, preventing the sun from rising. So then we have we need a last hero figure to kill Darkstar and take Dawn back and give it to Jon. So that could be Edric Dane. It would be a nice, Edric Dane, who was pre 5-year gap, potentially going to be the Sword of the Morning. It would be a nice, door prize. He doesn't get to be Sword of the Morning, but maybe he gets to help kill Darkstar. That would be cool, right? And get the sword to Jon. Or it could be that Jon Snow will somehow run into Darkstar. If he comes down to King's Landing at all, comes south, which I'm not even sure he will. But if he does, maybe he'll kill Darkstar. But like I said, you've got, like I said in the Darkstar video, rather, Ned killing Arthur Dane and taking Dawn from him is a potential for somebody killing Darkstar and taking Dawn and getting it to a Stark like Jon. So I think there's a lot of parallels going on with the Tower of Joy and with the Tower of Joy and both the original Last Hero versus the Others conflict, and of course the coming Last Hero versus the Others conflict, which would be Jon Snow, of course. So there you go. Some pretty cool parallels going. And that also, that's also just more evidence for the idea that Darkstar will steal Dawn, is because it fits so nicely into both the Tower of Joy parallels and what we think happened potentially with the original Last Hero. Morley, doubling up, sending PayPal and Super Chats, Morley. Thank you. For you, I will give a special delay rate manipulation. Okay, that's enough. Sorry. Might have gotten distracted there. Thank you, Morley. That is just, I say it is just a thank you. There's no question attached. Josiah sends in a question. Hi, my dude. Was wondering if you ever plan to take a look at the Boltons. The vampire imagery is crazy with them. Yes. Given the relevance of blood magic in the story, it seems like they may be more important to the plot. Might be important in more than just a plot sense. Oh, I see. As far as the symbolism goes. Okay. So that's worth talking about. Let's talk about the Boltons. The Boltons, much like Jaime Lannister, are something that I need to get to. They have a lot of good symbolism, and I just haven't worked my way there yet. And yes, that's absolutely like the sounds from Forbidden Planet. It is specifically a more complex version of this device, which is called a theremin, which does that. So, like I said, Jaime Lannister, I definitely owe you guys some Jaime talk. There's a patron-only essay, actually, about one of Jaime and Brienne's chapter that I did. But let's talk about the Boltons. They are fascinating. And Kraken Tacos, there's a little bit of a delay with when I get the email from the PayPal. So probably if you just send it, just give me a couple minutes and I will see it. So the Boltons, first of all, I want to make sure everybody knows about bolt-on theory. It's one of the best A Song of Ice and Fire old school theories. It's from the forums. It's from way back in the day. And the reason why it's so cool is because it hovers perfectly on the edge of tinfoil and plausibility. I mean, it is just right there. And essentially, the short version of it is that Roose Bolton is an immortal skin changer. It works like this. We know that Varamir Sixskins, who's not even a green seer, he's only a skin changer, he is capable of body snatching. He tries to body snatch Thistle, and he fails, primarily because he's so weak. I mean, he's on the edge of death. He has no strength. And then Thistle chooses to basically claw her own eyes out instead of being taken over by Varamir. So he may have even still been able to succeed had Thistle not done that. So this is magical mechanics here. Skin changers can body snatch. Bran can body snatch Hodor. Bran is even more powerful, obviously, than Varamir. So that's one piece of it. Now, the Boltons, obviously, what do? They wear skins of people. Literally wear people's skins, almost like they're taking symbolism too literally and turning the idea of skin changing into a very macabre, friggin' kind of weird taxidermy, right? And a related topic is the Faceless Men, who also, they've got all the Weirwood symbolism of the House in Black and White, and then they're wearing people's skins inside. So it's almost like what the Boltons are doing is like what the Faceless Men are doing, but the Boltons don't know the magic or something. Like they've lost the magic. But the important thing is that this literal wearing of people's skins that goes on inside the House of Black and White is happening inside of a Weirwood symbolic location. The House of Black and White has a Weirwood door. It has the Weirwood faces on the chairs inside. The kindly man has one worm in his skull face in the one scene, just like Bloodraven has a Weirwood root like a worm coming out of his skull face, on and on and on and on. And it's also the realm of death, which the Green Seers, that's very much where they live, in the darkness, in the the Bardo realm, outside of life. They're half dead, all that stuff. So we know to at least associate these ideas of literal wearing people's skins that the Faceless Men do with Green Seer ideas. So what about the Boltons? Not only are they wearing skin, they're wearing the skins of the Starks. And the Starks, of course, are closely tied to the Last Hero and the Children of the Forest and the First Men and all that stuff. So the Roose Bolton bolt-on theory is essentially that the original Bolton king, sometime long ago, there was a Bolton who essentially had a child so that he could body snatch the child and give himself a new body. And then that same soul kept doing that generation after generation, body snatching his own child and just taking on a younger body every time. And some of the evidence for that is in the comparisons of Ramsay and Roose. They have the same eyes. It's remarked upon several times. They're both described as moon pale. colorless eyes, like dirty ice. They both have the same very vivid symbolic descriptions of their eyes. And that's also supposedly how Roose knew that Ramsay was in fact his bastard. It was like, oh, he has my eyes. So some people have looked at that and said, oh, that's Roose identifying Ramsay as the next, it's like, oh, this is an acceptable child. He has he has the gift, he has the mark, he has my eyes. Like literally, I'm going to take his eyes. So it's kind of tinfoily, but again, it's working with the mechanics of what's there. Like we know that skin changers can do this. And George often creates his plot lines by taking a magical story element like skin changing and then asking himself what would human beings do with this? And potentially what would humans do with this in their darkest moments? That's what we see with Varamir Sixskins. He's using his skin changing ability entirely for selfish purposes. He uses his shadow cat to essentially rape women and enslave women, bring them to his lair, and to control the local, villagers and stuff. So he's a petty lord, but he's a very dark version of what people might do with this ability. So now you think about a more powerful and cunning type of ancient green seer or skin changer. Isn't it possible that one of them would figure this out? That all you have to do is find a new host body when you're getting old, and you can extend your life. Somebody would try to do that, and it's almost a classic fantasy trope or literature trope. So perhaps Roose Bolton is an immortal skin changer who's thousands of years old and is going to body snatch Ramsay. And that's the bolt-on theory. You can look it up if you want. There's more to it, and it's definitely a fun read. So then when we're talking about symbolic terms, you probably have to look at the Boltons as symbolizing Night King. Certainly that's the role that they seem to play in their specific scenes. Both Roose and Ramsay they have a lot of that Bloodstone Emperor, evil Azor Ahai symbolism, and ultimately Night's King symbolism. And we see that Roose and Ramsay are taking control of Winterfell when the snowstorm is descending. So this is maybe a clue that the original Night King was a Stark, even took over Winterfell during the Long Night. I definitely think we're going to see that the next time around. We're going to see the others win the Battle of Winterfell, unlike the show where they were defeated in one short night. So the Starks are pitted as this ancient enemy or the Boltons are pitted as this ancient enemy of the Starks. So maybe it would make sense if they were symbolizing the Night King essentially, and the Starks the last hero. But of course, it's likely that the last hero and Night's King are connected to House Stark somehow. So it's basically showing us that whole good and evil lives within the same house kind of wheel. They're just like alt Starks essentially. Oh, there's the original bolt-on theory. Thanks, Carl Karsnark. Johnny on the spot. It is on Westeros.org. There you go. I want to give credit to the author real quick. It's from Balerion the Kitten, May 5th, 2015. And, actually, she's not claiming to originate it, actually. This is, she's talking about Alt-Shift-X video about it. Oh, so if Alt-Shift-X has a video about this, that's definitely one to watch. He makes great videos. This may be one of those theories that's so old it's hard to figure out who it was that wrote it to begin with. But it was around already when I got to the forums in like 2014. So there you go. So yes, the Boltons are kind of like the Dark Stars to the Starks Danes. Absolutely, that's one way to look at it. Exactly right. Yeah, we can see that bifurcation of good and evil coming out of the same place, because that's kind of the lesson of Venus, right? Venus, during half of its cycle, rises in the evening as the even star, the first star of the evening. And then during the other half of its cycle, it's the morning star that rises in the morning. And for a long time, people thought they were a different star. people then figured out, hey, it's actually the same star that can play these two opposite roles, ascending from the, to the sky and one descending from the sky. So that's kind of the whole point of, I think that's one of the reasons why that mythology appeals to George, because he loves the idea of good and evil in balance, summer and winter in balance. The seasons have to, ice and fire in balance. We don't want fire to win outright, So this idea of Venus mythology giving you both the morning and the evening, the rising and the falling action, it lends itself very well to this idea that, the hero and the bad guy are connected. They're related to one another. It's a family affair, if you will. So I think that's where it's going as far as the Starks and Boltons, and your occasional evil Stark, your Starks and Danes. It's all that showing you that good and evil bifurcation. So, all right. All right. Donnie Darko says, regarding the mechanisms of warging in the story, could the great other or Night's King figure be a disposed soul awaiting the appropriate host? Very Lovecrafty, if true. Yes, absolutely. I recommend my Euron videos, 1 and 2. I've also got a couple live streams, but particularly in Euron Part 2, I get into the idea that Euron is going to end up a doormat, a host body for some entity that is alive in the Weirwood net or in, the Nether Realm, the Bardo, if you will. I think that person is most likely to be the Night's King / Azor Ahai, and this would have a lot of parallels to Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn and the character of Inaluki, who has parallels to Azor Ahai and Night's King both. So I love this idea that there is some entity that is in spirit form, is kind of like Sauron, I guess, a little bit, that is lurking in the Weirwood net, or again, somewhere, and that Euron, being very much a Lovecraftian figure, is essentially going to open one door too many and end up being taken over by that entity. And I wouldn't say that I think this is where it's going, but I think it's one possibility. And Quinn and I are going to actually do a whole live stream about this. Quinn just did a really cool Call of Cthulhu video, which is essentially the signature Lovecraft story, and he goes way in deep. He actually himself got possessed for the video. Quinn is always willing to lay himself on the line for his craft, and he did get possessed for a short time while doing the Lovecraft video. And I'm not even kidding. So make sure you check that one out. Karsnark, maybe you could dig up the link and drop it in when you get a second. But essentially, I tackled the Euron side of it, and Quinn is, a Lovecraft expert of the 33rd degree. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do a live stream, and we're going to talk about this idea of Euron being somebody who channels the old ones into reality, the old gods, Night's King, some sort of spirit entity that is out there into the world. And this would make sense. This would be a way for Euron to really become a new Night's King figure and someone who triggers the apocalypse, which is what all his symbolism suggests, right? It's just screams out apocalypse. And again, I covered all of that in Euron, King of the Apocalypse, which is part 1 of the Euron series. And so Euron, it's been obvious for a long time that he's got to have some hand in bringing on the new Long Night. And if you look at Euron Part 2, and I laid out all his symbolism, which suggests him as a new leader of the others. And I think the way that it makes the most sense to happen is that he'll be taken over by the dead spirit of Azor Ahai / Night's King. And then we'll have something that makes that like echoes the show in a weird way, right? So in the show, the character of Euron was turned into like just a chuckle nuts pirate, who did little one-liners and kind of did Victorian reaving stuff, and that's it. And then we had Night's King riding the dragon, stealing the dragon, leading the others. Well, in the books, obviously we don't have a Night's King, but we do have a much more powerful Euron who's becoming the clear third act villain of the story. So it's pretty easy to see that Euron will take up that same narrative space that Night King does in the show, meaning he'll steal a dragon from Dany. He'll be the major, again, third act villain. But I think that, and again, this is what I did in my videos, is that he's going to actually lead the others in some way or trigger their invasion in some way. And I think that's a good way to do it. He climbs atop the high tower, toots on his horn, blood magic, something, something, and then he gets possessed. So we'll have to see. We won't know. The thing is, we're not in Euron's head. So we're going to be seeing Euron from other people's perspectives. And he'll just look madder and madder, and we'll probably just have to wonder who is running the show there. That's another thing to consider. So we won't get a straight answer on it. I mean, maybe it'll be so obvious by his use of magic. Maybe Euron's voice will change. It'll be like, rah, rah, I am not Arthur, but probably not. So. Gabe's logic. Is the House of Black and White symbolically the Night's Watch and the Weirwood? Oh, let me put it on the screen here. Will they help the enslaved whites reclaim the gift of death that was taken from them? Yes, that's a great parallel. So I talked about this train of thought in the Born to Burn the Others video, which is about Daenerys primarily. And I was talking about how Daenerys has this whole history of freeing slaves and burning slave masters. And that if we look at the whites and the others, we can see that the whites are essentially like the slave masters. I'm sorry, the others are like the slave masters. And the whites literally called the thralls of the others. So they're very much the slaves. So if Dany were to take her dragons and burn the others, which seems like a very obvious thing to do, it will also be effectively culminating her arc of liberating slaves by burning slave masters. She'll essentially be fighting alongside with Jon when she does this, and the Night's Watch. And that whole Dany Flint story, I keep trying to figure out how that could be an echo for Daenerys fighting with the Night's Watch. But the Dany Flint story is just a really horrible tragedy, and I can't figure out what the parallel is there. But in any case, Daenerys will be fighting with the Night's Watch, with the dragons, obviously. This seems inevitable, and freeing the slaves. So to get to your question, if the House of Black and White symbolizes the Weirwood and potentially the Night's Watch, because the Night's Watch swear their oaths to the Weirwoods, the ones that follow the old gods, and they wear black. The original ones may have been undead. The original Night's Watch also, I believe, were skin changers like Cold Hands and like Jon. So that's essentially, yes, we could see the initiates of the House of Black and White as paralleling the Night's Watch, specifically the undead skin changer type of Night's Watch. And they bring the gift of death to the people who need it the most. And the first people that were brought the gift of death were slaves in the Valyrian mines. So yes, that makes a ton of sense if the Night's Watch, teaming up with Dany, is involved with freeing the whites from their icy bondage. And this is a further parallel to the House of Black and White. So very good, Gabe's logic. It's very logical of you. And very super chatty of you. Just saying hi. Theremin says hello. Pop over to the email inbox. Oh, got a couple more. Mary Jacobs, very excited about your book, and I applaud you for your fine effort. Love your content as always, Maud Mary. Thank you, Maud Mary. You are a stalwart supporter, and I really appreciate it. And one from Grant, a 420. The Weirwood have great knowledge, but how do they attain it? Melisandre tells us there's power in blood. We are shown that Bran tastes the sweet blood from the sword ice when Ned cleans it in the water. Well, not exactly. Does the blood carry the memories from the person to the trees? That's a good idea. Is that the blood sacrifice that makes the trees grow with knowledge? So this is interesting ideas here. So first of all, when Bran tastes the blood through the Weirwood roots in the pond, it's not Ned cleaning his sword in that scene. It's some very ancient scene of a white-haired woman and a bearded man sacrificing another captive, another bearded man. Everyone's got beards back then, but essentially the white-haired woman steps forward and uses a sickle-shaped knife and cuts the knife of the captive, and the blood pours out into the Weirwood pond, and Bran tastes the blood. And Elsewise, Ned also cleans his bloody sword in the water, which is just simply another way of suggesting that this ancient first man tradition of sacrificing blood to the Weirwoods is A, ancient, and B, very important. So then we've got the whole Jojen paste thing, right? If you haven't seen my Jojen paste video, definitely check that one out. I think all my best jokes are in that video. Some of my grossest jokes. In any case, Bran is told that the Weirwood paste is a paste of, quote, weirwood seeds. But it's almost surely either Jojen's blood or Jojen's blood and flesh, or maybe even Jojen's brains kind of quivers gelatinously. So you might have just scooped his brain right out of his head and plopped it in the bowl, Hannibal Lecter style. But in any case, we're told that it's weirwood seeds, but it's probably a human sacrifice. So maybe that's kind of what George is telling us, is that there are no weirwood seeds and that they literally are grown from blood sacrifice. Humans are the weirwood seeds. That is one way to look at that. So how do the weirwoods know everything? Well, I think that the weirwoods know everything because they represent the tree of knowledge, the universal world tree, Yggdrasil, and those kind of mythical world trees. They represent the axis mundi of the world and the universe. So it's just kind of like the framework on which the universe is built. The idea is that this tree was here before the world. The universe hangs on the framework of the world tree. So in the case of the Weirwoods, they're basically eternal. That we're told that they'll grow forever if left undisturbed. So the Weirwoods are probably the oldest things, in Westeros, or one of the oldest things in Westeros. And whatever magic gives them a certain amount of sentience, they've just been around to see everything and know everything. But it could be that the green seers going into the trees are carrying specific human knowledge into the trees as well. That's definitely not a crazy idea. I like that one, Grant. Andrea, thanks, Andrea, with a 2420. Oh, I see. It's a more generous 420. Thank you. Now shipping you and Quinn as the kings of ice and fire. Oh, no, you can't do that. Quinn, yeah, no. Well, I mean, I guess you can do that. Never mind. That cat's way out of the bag. But let's see. Something I've noticed in my reading is the saying of the others take you, or the others take blank. The others take your eyes, or the others take, it's uttered all over the seven kingdoms, and the others are like a boogeyman. Only Lord Commander Mormont ends up remembering, sort of. I feel like this is a Chekhov's gun. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this and any other forgotten histories that may come up. So, yeah, the others take you. The most interesting occurrence of that saying is when Robert says it, because the others, the Robert swears with the word others twice, I believe it is. In that first chapter, and the King Robert is a very important symbol, right? He symbolizes a green man, a horned god. Ned openly describes him as a horned god. All the Baratheons have all that Cernunnos stagman symbolism, just like Garth the Green does. And we see characters like Robert and Renly uniting that symbolism of the Baratheons and Garth the Green. So Robert is like a green man king, which I think was basically the original setup. Original lords and kings of Westeros would have been green seers and skin changers, in my opinion. And so when Robert walks around commanding the others to take the others take you, the others take your mild snows, the others this, it's basically just showing us that Robert, or just showing us that horned lords, that the green men are behind the others. The others are tied to the green men, to the old gods, to the Weirwoods, to the green seers, and all that stuff that Robert is symbolizing by walking around with the antlers and being a Garth-like Cernunnos stag boy. So that's the whole point of that. There's a lot of good symbolism, and I covered this in the Sacred Order of Green Zombies series, when Robert and Ned are walking around the Barrowlands and they're talking about the dead and about the others and all this stuff. So pretty cool stuff. Sacred Order of Green Zombies. That's the series to go if you want more about that. And I also did talk some Bolton stuff and some the first king, the one that's supposedly buried in the Great Barrow of Barrowton. All right. And, oh, that's right. I was going through the PayPals in the email. All right. If you sent a PayPal and I have not read it yet, then that means I overlooked it somehow. And please go ahead and drop it in the text there and tag me, just to make sure I don't miss anybody's. I do appreciate the support very much. Christopher Jazzcat, how will Theon fit in the story going forward? Well, Theon, first of all, is, as we know from the Winds of Winter spoiler chapter, mild Winds of Winter spoilers, he is currently hanging by his wrists on the wall of Stannis's little tower keep out on the island, the frozen island, a few miles outside of Winterfell. And the ravens, last we saw, were jumping up and down in their cages and screaming for Theon to be given to the tree, the tree. And basically right before that, Stannis was discussing with Asha Greyjoy the fact that he owes Theon's life to the Northerners who think he killed Bran and Rickon. And essentially Asha is saying, well, don't burn him alive. Give him to the old gods, just like Ned would have done, do it the North way. And it seems like Asha is mostly trying to prevent Theon from being burned alive, which is awful, and trying to get him a more painless death, just getting your head chopped off. It's probably Asha's motivations. But the ravens seem very fired up about the idea of Theon being given to the tree. So I don't know if Theon's actually going to be killed and given to the Weirwood. I think more likely they want Theon near the Weirwoods so that Bran can use him as an instrument and do something magical, or something else, something other than Theon dying is meant to happen by the Weirwood. That would be my guess, because I really like the theories that Theon could become a latecomer king of the Iron Islands. And furthermore, he seems like too interesting of a character. When you look at his narrative arc, it's just not complete yet. And so I don't think that it would make sense for him to die at the Weirwood tree. But clearly it's important that he gets to the Weirwood tree. So that's the first thing that I think, is that he's increasingly going to become a tool of Bran and a vessel that Bran can maybe act through, because Theon can hear Bran's voice on the wind at the Weirwoods. And some people have speculated that, George is working with this concept of people who are broken down and half mad, have one ear in the spirit realm. Think of Patchface, for example. It's a very old shamanic principle. So it kind of makes sense that Theon can be used that way. Also, he has this very close connection to Bran. Basically his whole arc is connected to Bran. So that's the first part of Theon. And then eventually he could become a king of the Iron Islands if George wants to restore the houses and stuff like that. But we'll have to see. Beric had no fire magic in life. OG Night's Watchmen weren't green seers in life, only when they returned, being the horn that wakes the sleepers in their vows. Okay, let me try to be working with this, obviously the limited character count here. So okay, I see what you're saying. So I've held up Beric as a major parallel. Whoops. Oh, well, I guess I owe you one anyways. There you go. It was an accidental theremin that was an intentional theremin subconsciously. So the whole idea is that Beric is a parallel for the idea of Green Zombie Night's Watchman, because Beric is living in a Weirwood cave and wearing black cloaks, but he's resurrected and he's got a flaming sword. And we ultimately know that, Jon, the last hero, should probably have a flaming sword. And then, I forget the whole line of comparison. That's right. It's the Scarecrow Knight thing. So when Jon has his Azor Ahai dream, when he dreams of defending the wall by himself with a burning red sword against, enemies that scuttle up the ice like spiders and the undead, his only companions are those Scarecrow Knights that the Night's Watchmen made to look like dummy Night's Watch. The thing is that they catch on fire. So you have these burning Scarecrow Knights. Well, Beric is called a Scarecrow Knight, and he's burning because he's animated by fire magic. So it's not just that he's Weirwood associated, that he's an Azor Ahai burning sword figure, that he has a black cloak, that he's defending the people. He's also specifically a burning scarecrow knight, which is what Jon, those are the people that should be helping Jon at the wall, right? So what Gabe is pinning in on here is that Beric only became this magical creature after he was resurrected. And so he's asking the OG Night's Watchmen, did they become Green Seers when they were resurrected? Well, no. So my whole theory is that, think about Jon, right? Jon is a skin changer. And skin changers and Green Seers, for all intents and purposes, are kind of the same. Green Seers are really just more powerful. They can skin change the tree, but they both have the same set of powers. So the idea is that Jon, being a skin changer, is going to help him become a better zombie than Beric and a better zombie than Stoneheart, because his soul, instead of just starting to dissipate after he dies, his soul is going to be in his wolf, and it is going to be merging with the wolf spirit, but it's not doing whatever, it's not going to the normal afterlife that Beric or Stoneheart's soul started to go to and then was like called back from. So the idea is that Jon, being a skin changer, Ghost is acting as a soul jar, and that when his spirit, and maybe his and Ghost spirit, is put back in his body, it will have been preserved in a different way. And this is my explanation for Cold Hands, who seems to be an ice white, yet is conscious and is in possession of his own body, and he's not controlled by the others. He doesn't have blue star eyes, and he appears to still have skin changer powers because he can talk to the ravens, and he rides this 10-foot tall elk, which is a powerful wild creature that you could never control without the use of skin changer magic. So essentially what I'm saying is that the original Last Hero and the original Night's Watchmen who, quote, died, the Last Hero's companions who died, it was because they were all skin changers that they were able to be resurrected as Cold Hands style zombies. And the whole friggin' point of this is that Cold Hands and soon resurrected Jon, they're ideally suited to go into the frozen lands and fight the others because they don't need to eat, they don't sleep, and they don't need to stay warm. They're impervious to the cold. So that all of the normal hazards of the frozen lands, they don't apply to Cold Hands and soon to be Jon. So that's why it makes sense for the Last Hero and his 12 dead companions to become resurrected people and become the first Night's Watchmen as undead, resurrected skin changers. Just like Jon will be a resurrected skin changer, Night's Watchman, Last Hero. You see what I'm saying? Like it sounds a little crazy at first, but then you realize, oh, Jon is going to be an undead skin changer, Last Hero, Night's Watchman. So that's exactly what I'm saying happened the first time. Undead skin changer, Night's Watchman. So they didn't become Green Seers when they were resurrected, but they did become zombies, which gave them, again, powers that they needed to go north and fight the others. The ability not to need food or heat. So we see that with Cold Hands. He doesn't need to eat. He doesn't need to come near the fire. He's just good. You know, he's been ranging the frozen lands for decades, perhaps centuries. There you go. Genty M, I got you a super chat from you a long time ago, like 20 minutes ago. If you sent one in since then I may have missed it. But feel free to repeat your question. I think I did get it. And I'm having so much fun. I sailed past 4:20 Central Time like 21 minutes ago. So if you'll just allow me a quick respite, I'll continue to talk. Hope everyone's having fun. By the way, it is my intention to be more regular about these streams. I don't want to go too far into personal life stuff, but I have been moving around lately. I have not been in a permanent housing situation. That is now changed. I'm setting up my studio with all of my beautiful decorations and stones and things. I'll have that going soon. And so essentially I'll be able to do more regular live streams and all that kind of thing. So my normal time, it used to be Sunday at 3 Eastern, noon Pacific. But when some other YouTube fellows and personalities tried to cancel me about a year and a half ago, they try to take my time slot. That's why you might notice other people streaming at noon Eastern specifically on Sundays, or 3 Eastern. So I moved back to 4:20 Eastern because that's kind of my brand. And I'm staking that out as my time. So you can count on me either doing a stream on Sunday at 4:20 Eastern or putting out a video. I like to put my videos out on Sunday sometimes if I don't do a stream. So point is, I'll let you guys know, and you want to follow me at the Dragon LML on Twitter. But that is, I'll try to do the consistent streams for you guys. 1 second. All right, so disembodied head. Yes, that was me for a second there. Oh, I had a fun thing I was going to do. Hang on a second. Watch this. It's me. I'm calling to you from beyond. The great beyond. It is I. Wait, hold on. Where am I? I'm trying to see you. There I am. Oh, I'm upside down. I have a crystal head. Sorry. It looked better last night when I practiced it. All right. What are we talking about? Somebody send me a question. Let's get this thing back on the road here. All right. So let's talk about the book that I'm writing. Yes. Thank you for the emojis. The book that I'm writing, and I'll do that by giving you a sneak preview of the video, my next video, Reinterpreting the Garden of Eden, which, like I said, will be the beginning of the book, essentially. I'm going to rework it a little bit. The video is kind of more condensed, but got some exciting stuff in here. So sneak peek. And I should have this video out by next Sunday. That's probably what will be happening next Sunday. Will be a brand new video. So let's see. Do I want to read the first page or so? Or should I jump in the middle and give you a sneak peek? Let's see here of something right in the middle. Yes, I'll read the beginning. That's probably the best way to tease it. So here we go. This will be about, I don't know, 5 minutes here. So the Christian Bible, friends, begins with the story of the Garden of Eden, and beginning with it is a tradition of religious guilt and shame, which has unfortunately left its mark on millions of people around the world, including my younger self. Fitting then that the key to unlocking such religious guilt, at least for me, can be found in the reinterpretation of that first of biblical myths. And a myth it is, not in the sense of the word which means falsehood or erroneous belief, but in the classic sense of the word which was used to describe stories whose metaphors and symbols work a transformative effect on the listener. Ideas are the most powerful things in existence, and sacred mythology is the means by which our most potent, illuminating, and timeless ideas are conveyed. Like a sharp sword, the power of such myths can cut many ways, and the Garden of Eden myth is exceptional in its ability to bind the human spirit or to free it, depending on how it is interpreted. So you guys know, the next little bit I summarize the Garden of Eden story. And you guys know the story. So I'm skipping ahead. It says, the punishment and banishment is total, so total that mankind has supposedly existed in a fallen state ever since, cut off in some sense from God and his holiness. This is why, according to Christian doctrine, or more specifically Protestant Christian doctrine, every human born since the fall of man is supposedly born into sin and stamped with a sinful nature, and are therefore in need of the sacrifice of a blameless man, Jesus Christo, to stand in for their sins so they might gain admittance to heaven. Protestant Christianity, in case you didn't know, is specifically defined by this belief that salvation, i.e. going to heaven when you die, is obtained only through this sacrifice of Jesus. And this belief hinges on the idea that the Garden of Eden story constitutes what is called the, quote, fall of man. Now, interpreted this way, it's kind of a bummer of a story. We used to have this awesome paradise, but we didn't manage to keep it very long. And worse yet, this interpretation of the Garden of Eden places the burden of atonement for millennia-old sin squarely on the shoulders of each one of us, even before our own sin has been accounted for. This is metaphor as cudgel, my friends. It's being used to drive home the basic idea that people are just bad and in need of salvation from a higher power, or at least from his faithful advocates on earth. Yes, isn't that always the story? Now, the principle being outlined here at the beginning of the Bible is the sin-punishment dynamic, the idea that virtue is based on adherence to rules and norms, which I would label as a fairly grim and even authoritarian-leaning worldview. The Stalinist Republic of Eden, that's right. So God's will, essentially, is being expressed as a negative reinforcement mechanism here. He's compelling obedience by means of threat of punishment. And this puts the emphasis on stasis, even creating a virtue out of it. Don't change, right? Just don't break the rules. Stay like that. Now, this stands in contrast to, say, an exhortation of intentional creative action that's meant to catalyze growth and dynamism. That's how I think about it anyways. But basically, I'm talking about inspirational acts, creative acts. Now, this basic concept of hierarchy is spelled out in the pre-fallen Eden, where man is given dominion over the rest of creation as God has dominion over all. And it says right in Genesis, let us make humankind in our image according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds and the cattle, yada, 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 yada. And then he says, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. So he's talking about subduing and having dominion. So God's making man in his image. He's giving him authority over everything. It's very top down. You guys see how this works here. And then, of course, ultimately, the Garden of Eden story is about the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the choice that Adam and Eve make to eat the fruit. It's about free will and inspiration, and God's basically seems to be punishing those things in favor of maintaining hierarchical established order. So, as you guys know, I tend to side with the Gnostic interpretation of this whole thing, which essentially means that eating the fruit is good, or at least something that man had to do, because it represents the knowledge of good and evil, the ability to discern good from evil, or, you know, it's one way of really just talking about free will. Because before that, they don't, mankind doesn't know right from wrong. Adam and Eve, they don't know that there is such a thing as evil in the world. And then the serpent comes along and says, actually, if you eat from the tree, you won't die, which is what God tells them. Your eyes will be opened and you'll be like God, knowing good from evil. And what it really means is that then they gain the choice, the burden, if you will, of having to discern right from wrong and having to figure out what the right thing is. So the whole thing about a prescribed dogmatic worldview is it tells you what the rules are. It tells you what you can do, what you can't do, how you go to heaven, how you go to hell, and your choices, your free will basically constitutes with lining up the individual choices you have on a day-to-day basis with the values established by your worldview. If you don't know what your worldview is, or you're exploring that, then you have to, you have to figure out what your own values are and then apply those to every given situation. And you have to decide for yourself what you think your values should be instead of adopting them from your parents or your church or your community or what have you. So if we talk about, I think what this is talking about is essentially what makes man different from animals. We're talking about the great anthropological leap forward here. When we go from this primordial garden where we're kind of in this innocent state to all of a sudden we have our eyes opened and now we have to decide for ourselves right and wrong. We're forced from the garden. Now we got to work harder and we got to deal with hardship and responsibility and all the stuff. So I think that the story that's, the surface reading of the Garden of Eden, the traditional interpretation, is essentially criminalizing free will in a sense. It's criminalizing the choice to eat the fruit. And it's essentially it's a scold, and it's literally the first story in the Bible is telling us why we're evil and how we got to this place where we require redemption just to not go to hell. This is where it comes from. And if you think about like eating fruit from the magic tree, well, this is a classic world archetype, right? With Odin drinks from the well of Mimir, which is where the Yggdrasil grows from. And the Egyptians have all kinds of myths about the lotus and other sort of, psychotropic fruit or substances, the food of the gods that comes from these sacred trees. So we see that story right there in the Garden of Eden. We see man walking up to the magic tree, plucking the fruit, or actually woman, not man, it's Eve that plucks it first, and then transforming their consciousness. So it actually turns into stoned ape theory, which is, of course, the name for Terence McKenna's idea, which is, not just his idea, but essentially saying that the thing that spurred mankind forward, the great anthropological leap forward, can be traced to psychedelic mushrooms or other psychotropic substances, literally substances that expand people's consciousness. Those could be the thing that expanded man's consciousness. I'm going to talk about that in the book as well. But essentially the cool thing about the Garden of Eden, and the reason that this is so important to me, is that if you're raised Christian, specifically Protestant Christian, but I think the Catholic interpretation of the Garden of Eden is somewhat similar. It conveys a lot of shame and guilt on you. And again, it drives this message home that humans are bad and in this fallen state or whatever. But then when you put the Garden of Eden myth in the context of otherworld mythology, oh, look at this. Oh, that is a tasty looking beast. I need to get me one of them. By the way, I did give you thanks for the yeah. Right back at you. So underneath this orthodox interpretation of the Garden of Eden is this much more wondrous and classic story of mankind reaching for the food of the gods, expanding their consciousness. It's like a Prometheus story, essentially. So the reason that this was so transformative for me is because it came along for me just at the right time in my life when I was mostly had expunged my sort of I say Christian guilt, but I want to clarify that I'm referring to the dogmatic use of Christianity and religion. I don't, quote unquote, hate Christianity or think that all religion is bad or anything like that. I think it's all about the dogmatic and literal interpretation of basically sacred myths. And what I'm trying to do with this book is sort of straighten that out, essentially. And I'm sorry, I think I broke my train of thought somewhere in there. But the reason I'm writing this book is essentially because reinterpreting the Garden of Eden myth for me really just dissolved this idea of the devil and hell as being something that I needed to fear. And maybe if I don't do what God says, I'll be condemned and damned. And then you look at the story and you can just flip it around so completely and realize that disobeying God and, quote unquote, and reaching for the fruit was a good thing and a step forward for humankind. I actually compare Eve to Neil Armstrong, if you will, in this essay, One Giant Leap Forward for Mankind. Then it really helps, like I said, dissolve that guilt and that fear and that idea that, if you don't do what you were told, you're going to go to hell. And it's just like, actually, no, this story is a living myth, which is transformative and powerful and can be read a bunch of different ways. And in fact, I even, in the video, you'll see, but I actually read it forward and still get something out of it that way too. So that's probably all I'll go into it. Actually, no, there's one more thing I will say. So the way that this ties into A Song of Ice and Fire, I've talked about this before, but I had read the series maybe once or maybe twice. And it was back in 2015, the very beginning of 2015, maybe even December 2014. And I was listening to Radio Westeros and History of Westeros talk about Azor Ahai and Lightbringer and stuff. And I had just discovered podcasts and all that. So I was just venturing out. I'm not typically a fandom person or whatever, and was just listening to them talk about Lightbringer and the moon and cracking the moon. And I'm a big Graham Hancock fan. Graham Hancock is very into interpreting classic mythology through an astronomy lens and showing how the ancients had more astronomy knowledge than we know. A lot of times they would plan their monuments and sacred sites out along the, according to the patterns of the stars on key solstices and equinoxes and things like that. And so when I was listening to this myth about the moon cracking open and dragons pouring forth from the moon, I was loosely familiar with the idea that sometimes meteors and comets could be symbolized as dragons in world mythology. And so that was the first brainwave that I had, like, oh, well, dragons coming from a moon that cracked open, that's actually talking about some sort of collision event involving the moon. And then, it would have been moon meteors, pieces of the moon cracked off, falling to Earth as meteors that would have been, these fire-breathing dragons. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute, a moon cracking and meteors in a cataclysmic event like this, well, this is probably what caused that long night thing, right? So then I dove into that. 3 days later, I came out of this like trance that I had been in, where I didn't sleep much, didn't even smoke much weed. I was basically just working and typing and researching, and it would just happen to be that I had a few days off to do this. And at the end of it, I worked my way around to the idea that the word Lightbringer is a synonym for Lucifer. And I got into the Venus mythology and learning all about that. And that brought me to the Garden of Eden and the idea that the serpent, who's associated with Lucifer, but that's a matter of interpretation and debate or whatever, the serpent literally is the light bringer in the Garden of Eden story. It's the catalyzing force which encourages mankind to reach for the stars, reach for the fruit, and expand our consciousness and to become more like God, if you will, having the knowledge of good and evil. I haven't read Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology. It's on my list of stuff that I know I need to read. Quinn's a big Neil Gaiman fan, and I've listened to Neil Gaiman talk about writing, but I actually haven't read that. So setting that aside, it's on my list. I worked my way to the Lucifer stuff on the third day of the research, and I had kind of an emotional thing when I came to the whole Gnostic interpretation of the Garden of Eden and realized it could be flipped around and all this. And I don't know, it was just a very freeing experience for me. And it really it's helped me leave behind my last little bit of sort of guilt, like I said, Christian guilt, and just fully blast off into the idea that myths can be interpreted in many ways. They're not meant to be taken literally and turned into dogma, but rather things to sort of meditate on and to work a personal transformation in your life. And it literally did transform me. I lived that. I experienced that. And so that's why I'm writing a book about that. I don't know what else to say about it. This book is essentially everything I've learned from researching A Song of Ice and Fire over the course of 5 years is going to go into this book about symbolism and mythology and how to reconcile our religious upbringing from these old religions that don't seem to speak to the modern world, how we can take the wisdom from those old stories and myths, because that's basically what old religion, when I say myth and mythology, again, I always mean it in a reverential sense, never as Christian myths as in they're false. No, every religion has its own mythology, its own legends, its own stories and fables. To me, those words are basically interchangeable. Okay, so essentially, what I see is a lot of the classic religions that kind of don't know what to do with our modern scientific world, right? Science defines reality in this concrete way that the world never used to be defined before. There never used to be such a thing as proving why the sun shines. Anybody that came along with a good explanation for why it rains or why the sun shines or why the sun rises and sets could sell their explanation if it sounded good, because you can't prove anything. Now everything's proven, not everything, but most everything. We can observe it, mark it down, demonstrate it in a lab and all this stuff. So there's a lot less mystery in the world. And I think some of the classic religions kind of don't know what to do with that. And essentially the answer is taking our religious upbringing, and I'm mostly talking about Christianity in Western countries, but I think it also applies to religions like Judaism or Islam, which are also monotheistic religions, tend to be somewhat conservative religions. Judaism's a little more liberal, but you get the idea. You know, basically, we want to look at our religious upbringing and our old stories and analyze them as symbolic and sacred mythology with layers of metaphor, not as things which are intended to sort out, you know, the non-believers from the true believers and all that. So I think I've gone on long enough, but that's what's burning in my heart here. And so that's what that first book is going to be about. And essentially what I'm going to do is when I release the video next week, I'm going to have some sort of first steps of an Indiegogo or something like that started, at least a mailing list for people to sign up on and to be involved in the project. And I'll get that going in the next few weeks. So the purpose of the video is essentially to draw interest to the book and what I'm going to be doing and show you what it's about. But it's also a video I've just wanted to make for a long time on its own. So there you have it. Pop back over to PayPal. I see a couple more coming in. Grant again, the 420. Thanks, Grant. More Weirwood. I ask about the blood sacrifice as one way the Weirwood learn things, but the trees have eyes too. They obviously see things that happen in their general area. Bran looks through the trees even back in time. That said, does it require a man of the Night's Watch to do his vows in front of a Weirwood to give him access to the Black Gate? I don't know. It's probably the kind of thing where it just happened to line up. Like back in the day when people were using the Black Gate, then all of the Night's Watchmen would have been first men. So this is the thing to realize, okay? In the current story, Jon chooses to go say his Night's Watch oath in the Grove of Nine to the Weirwoods. And we're told that this is what the first men who join the Watch do. Nowadays, most people in Westeros worship the Faith of the Seven, which is an Andal religion. And so they say their vows in the Sept. But before the Andals came to Westeros, which was after the Long Night, by the way, then that means all the original Night's Watchmen would have been first men who worshiped the Weirwoods. And all of them would have said their oaths to the Weirwood trees. And so think about that. When they're swearing to man the wall and be the light that brings the dawn and all those things, they're making those promises to the Green Seers. And that essentially is a good evidence that the Children of the Forest and the Green Seers were involved in setting up the Night's Watch, helping the last hero defeat the others, all that stuff. So essentially the people that would have been using the Black Gate probably would have been first men who gave their oaths to Weirwoods anyway. So I don't know if that has to be that, but it just probably would have worked out that way. Matthew T says, your last live stream really made the idea of Azor Ahai as two aspects click with me. I'm redoubling my focus on myth, and I'm really interested in revisiting the Bloodstone Pantheon. Thanks. Appreciate that, Matt. And yeah, it's, you know, the two most important mythologies to understand for A Song of Ice and Fire, besides Norse mythology, which is like the most obvious one, are the sort of Green Man nature cycle mythology that's tied to European folklore, Holly King, Winter King, Cernunnos, all that stuff. And then the Morning Star Venus mythology. And those two have a lot of overlap because they both work on cycles. The whole thing about Venus is it cycles from, you know, morning star to evening star, to day to night associations, from rising to falling. And so your deities like Christ, like Lucifer, like Quetzalcoatl, Inanna, and many other, quote, morning star deities that are associated with Venus, they always have that rising and falling action. Like Jesus descends from heaven, and then after he dies, he ascends back to heaven. That's just like Venus as the even star appearing to fall to earth and then appearing to rise as the morning star. Lucifer, for example, he rises to challenge God and then is thrown down from heaven. Okay. Quetzalcoatl, or the, not Quetzalcoatl, but the hero brothers in the Quetzalcoatl, in the, oh gosh, I'm screwing this up. I forget the name of the book, the Mayan book that has the story of the hero twins. but they essentially are parallel figure to Quetzalcoatl as far as Morningstar mythology goes. They go down into the underworld and then come back up. And Inanna does the same thing, goes down and it comes back up. Point being, Morningstar stuff, always about resurrecting, death and life, the cycle of day and night. So then you go over to nature cycle mythology. All nature cycle mythology is simply about personifying the cycle, literally the cycle of nature, spring, summer, fall, winter. That's why we have the green god who dies in the fall and then resurrects in the spring. He's literally just a personification of nature's vitality. So winter is when he dies. And George is using that symbolism all over the place with the Last Hero, with the Night's Watch, with Garth the Green. And he does a lot of cool, Popol Vuh. I think that's how you say it. That is the book. So Persephone is actually a nature cycle goddess. She does exactly, goes down to the underworld and then eats the pomegranates. And then because of that, she's stuck halfway there. So in some versions, she's there for 6 months and then she comes back for 6 months. And her mother is the goddess of nature. And so she is sad, essentially, when Persephone is gone. And then everything dies. And when Persephone comes back, it's springtime. So she is essentially a nature cycle character. But you see how similar it is to the Morningstar mythology. And that's why George chooses to have those two overlap. And that's essentially what the whole long night thing is. The long night is evil because it stops the cycle of nature on winter, and it stops the life and death cycle where the dead are not staying dead, but instead, killing the living. So there you go. Folks, we are just about coming up on 2 hours, and my cockatoo is getting angry. So I have a pet cockatoo. That's what I'm talking about. Bird, pink bird. She's mad. So big mad. So I'll take last call for questions, and then I'm going to go chill with the birds because I'm a pink bird slave, first and foremost. I'm a YouTube slave, but I'm also a pink bird slave. So last call for questions, like I said. And let me flip over to the email inbox. Yep, got one more from David for future Twitter stuff. Thank you, David. By the way, if you are curious about my political musings, Twitter is the place to find them. That's basically all I do on Twitter. There's hardly any Song of Ice and Fire on there. It's basically my political opinion. So if you want that, at the Dragon LML, I don't tend to usually talk politics on the channel, but I certainly have thoughts, and that's where you can find them. Although I did realize that George very skillfully put in the concept of fake news in A Song of Ice and Fire all the way back in, I think it's book 2 or 3. And let's see here. It's the one where, let's see. It's the one where Cersei is sitting around and they're plotting to suggest that Stannis Stannis's daughter Shireen was actually fathered by Patchface. And they create that fake news, if you will, to combat the real truth, which is that Joffrey is a bastard. And that's exactly the point of political propaganda. So I just think it's cool that George put that in the story. I'm trying to find the quote here as I talk. Where is it? Where is it? Well, yeah, I can't find it. Yeah, I guess the summary will have to suffice. But basically, yes, the story is getting out that all of Cersei's kids are illegitimate, not fathered by Robert, but by Jaime. And so they, in order to combat that, they put out the story that Stannis' wife fathered Shireen on the fool Patchface. And they even comment about how it's so ridiculous that people have to talk about it, right? Yeah, Patchface, you are not the father. And that's, we've seen that over the last 4 years, that a lot of the propaganda has been completely over the top and ridiculous, and it like confuses and mesmerizes, and it just makes everyone talk about it, and it sort of just drowns out the actual truth of the story. So it's a very good political principle that George has put into the book there. And of course, fake news and political propaganda aren't new, and they weren't invented 4 years ago. It's a thing as old as time in politics. So, you know, pretty cool, pretty cool. Bailey popping in. Any ideas on how long Darkstar will live and who will ultimately kill him? Well, there's not that much time left in the story, so he's not going to live too long. But he needs to live long enough to take Dawn out of Starfall, Operation Get Dawn out of Starfall, and to King's Landing. I think that he'll probably die when Dany takes King's Landing from Fagon, which might be at the end of this Winds of Winter or at the beginning of Dream of Spring, somewhere in that time frame. Probably in this book, because I think Dany's going to take King's Landing right before the Long Night Falls or something like that. I don't see her trying to take King's Landing after the Long Night Falls. And I think the Long Night is going to fall by the end of Winds of Winter. Ergo, Dany should attack King's Landing before the end of Winds of Winter. That's when Darkstar should die, probably. And then I think Dany gives the sword to Jon. And Jon gives her back Longclaw so she can give it to Mormont. And they do a sword trade. And Jon has Dawn. That's just, don't shoot the messenger. So who will kill him? Like I said, I would love it if Edric Dane was involved. That would be really cool. It could be Jon himself. It could be anybody on Team Dany. So yeah, and he might be one of the Sand Snakes for all we know. I could totally see Darkstar getting taken out by someone that he doesn't suspect or someone he overlooks. So Jon already gets Longclaw. Oh boy, here we go. Okay, so Longclaw, guys, is not special. It's just a Valyrian sword. All Valyrian swords are cool, and yes, it has cool symbolism, but Longclaw isn't Lightbringer. It's not. There's nothing about Longclaw that makes it distinct. The only Valyrian steel sword that is really special is Ice, which has been turned into Oathkeeper and Widow's Wail, specifically because it's tied to the Starks and it has Ned's blood on it and stuff. But even that, I still don't think is Lightbringer. We need something more than a Valyrian steel sword ultimately to be Lightbringer, in my opinion. So I don't really give a shit what happens to Longclaw. Probably Mormont will have it, or maybe it'll get broken or knocked out of Jon's hands, or any number of things could happen. I don't think it matters. I think what matters is that if Dawn is meant to be wielded by Jon, as a new last hero, as Lightbringer, then that will happen somehow. So Longclaw will go somewhere else so that Jon can wield Dawn. Now, it could be that Jon isn't going to wield Dawn and that Longclaw is just going to catch on fire, and that's that. And any Valyrian steel sword can become a Lightbringer. And maybe it's not a one special sword thing. That's also possible. But the point is, if Jon is meant to wield Dawn, Longclaw is not an obstacle. It'll go somewhere. And I do think it could make sense if Jorah has a redemption arc where he joins the Night's Watch and joins the fight against the others, just like he did on the show. It makes a lot of sense to me. And that's the kind of scenario where he could be given back Longclaw so that he can bring honor back to his house and fight for the living with an effective weapon against the others. So there you go. Was that a good answer? Hope that wasn't too snarky. I'm just trying to be funny. Cool. Yeah, Jorah's got that demon face. Good point. He's been transformed. He's way scarier than Ian Glenn looked in the show. Very handsome, dashing Ian Glenn. Book Mormont is the hairy bear. He's got covered in black hair, and he's been beat up, and he's got the face demon mark, and he's a monstrous looking dude. Yeah, and also Dark Sister is, confirmed to have been taken north of the wall with Bloodraven. So probably it's in the Weirwood Cave, and we'll probably see Mira take it and bring it back in. So I think all the Valyrian steel weapons, we'll see them gathering at the wall because, this might be too much wishful thinking, but I do think we should get some sort of echo of the last hero and his dirty dozen. where you have a mission to the north with Jon and Dany and a few, people like Jaime, Jorah Mormont, people like that. Yeah, I could totally see that. And they all need Valyrian steel or dragonglass, one or the other, because those are the only effective weapons against the others. So there you go. Yes, a Morningstar is a spiked spherical mace, and every time George talks about actual Morningstar maces, you better believe there is crazy mythical astronomy symbolism happening. In the Arion Bright Flame versus Dunk fight, it's like a falling star, the Morningstar. It's really cool. Mira's role versus the show non-outcome. Yeah, I think I like the idea that Mira is going to make a boat, and that Bran and Mira are going to escape the cave through the underground river, and that Mira's Cranog Man boat making skill will come into play, because it makes more sense than her hauling a sled through the woods now, doesn't it? Cat's Paw. I don't think the cat's paw is that important. I think it's more of a show thing. But if it is going to come back around, then Arya could wield it. Anybody could wield it, really. I like the idea of Arya getting Dark Sister, though, because Arya is like a Dark Sister. The Valyrian axe at the vaults of White Harbor. Yes, give me. I think it's the Celtigar. Isn't that the Celtigars that have the Valyrian axe? Oh, they have the Kraken horn. Yes. Anyways, all Valyrian weapons are welcome, including that Valyrian steel RX somebody needs to take from that bloody mummer. Pro tip: if you can get LML started talking about Dawn and Lightbringer as he tries to end the stream, you get an extra 30 minutes. Sometimes. Jinty M. Ironic if Darkstar fell in his own Morningstar. Hey, what Edgelord Darkstar does in the privacy of his own quarters is between him and the Lord. All right, we don't talk about that. I guess I don't think he would fall on his sword, but he could definitely be killed with Dawn, just like Arthur Dayne might have been killed with Dawn, and just like Night King might have been killed with Dawn by the last hero. Could definitely see Gerald Dane being killed with Dawn. That would make a lot of sense. So I will say that. The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross by John Allegro. I want to say that I have heard people talk about that book, or that I've read it a long time ago when I was reading a lot of books like that kind of all ran together in my mind. But I think it's definitely a stoned ape theory book, right? So 420 Mountain Time, Rocky Mountain High. Praise Garth. And there you go. What about Jaehaerys absorbing Braxton Beesbury's Morningstar on his shield? I have to go look at that scene. I'm sure it means something. Obviously, there's a lot of Dragon Morningstar symbolism, but it probably means something specific within the actions of that scene, wherever it's mentioned. So I'll have to look that up. Beesbury, though, the honey is always a fire of the gods symbol. So it's being used that way in a lot of ways in a Song of Ice and Fire, both with the Child of Garth, Rowan Goldtree, or no, Beesbury, whoever it was, Beesbury that kept the first bees and stuff. That's all, food of the gods stuff. So, all right, friends. So I'm gonna go ahead and sign off. Thank you very much for joining me. It means a lot. All 300 of you coming out. Oh, I should check that subscriber number. See if I got up to 300. I was not paying attention. And oh no, I went down. How did that happen? It must be a YouTube error. It says 29,958. It's weird. That's probably a mistake. Anyways, well, I'll get to 30,000 soon. And if you're watching this on the replay, maybe you can help straighten this out. So, again, if you're watching, it's the triple click now that you got to do. You click the red subscribe button, and then you click the notification bell, and then another little thing pops up, and you got to click all notifications so that anytime I do a video or a stream, you will get notified. If you have the YouTube app on your phone, it will ping your phone 30 minutes before the stream and say, hey, LML is going to get stoned and talk about madness. go check it out if you're into that kind of thing. So there you go. Appreciate it, guys. Have a happy Sunday. Have a happy 4 years, if you will. Got to get back to work, though. Can't sit on our laurels, folks. The work never stops. The arc of the universe only bends towards justice if we bend it. Doesn't do it on its own, folks. So, got to roll up the sleeves, quit drinking champagne, and get back to rage tweeting. All right, guys. See you later. Thanks for coming.